This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Haba, and welcome everyone to Freilich and Chanukah. We're continuing our series of Shiurim on Sefer Bereshis. Shiurim on Sefer Bereshis are sponsored by Dr. Zakheim Umeshpachta, Leilui Nishmas Rav Shlomo Eliezer, Ben Harav Yaakov Zakheim, and Leilui Nishmas her mother, Rivka Bas Tuvia, the Neshama Shnev and Aliyah, they should be Melitza Yisharim for their whole family at Bias Koyel Tzedek. Tonight's Shiur is sponsored by the Gerstenfeld family. We wish them Bracha V'Atzlacha, Yeshuos, Refuos, V'Nechamos. Also sponsored by my good friend Rabbi Avi Hager and his wife Ricky, Le'iloi Nishmas, Mati Kest, who is a bunkmate of mine back in Camp Monk, who unfortunately passed away this week, Mordechai Tzvi ben Rabbi Yitzchak Elimelech, and also by Rabbi Nassan Welder, L'Zecher Nishmas, their mother-in-law, Perel Bas Baruch, the Neshama Shnev and Aliyah, Bi Melitza Yisharim for their whole family at Bias Koyel Tzedek. Okay, a few public service announcements. Number one, hopefully you got your Sefer on Chanukah, The Light and the Splendor. You still have a couple days to read it before Chanukah is over. In case you're finished that Sefer and you're still bored, don't forget to get your Sefer on the great Tana Reb Meir Baal HaNes, whose yahrzeit, according to many, is this coming Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh Teves. The next Sefer is being prepared on Purim. If anybody wants to help participate in publication, please let us know. Okay, we're going to speak about a subject tonight, not related specifically to Chanukah, but rather the narrative of the Parshas that we're reading. This is something that has been percolating for some time. It's quite a stirring subject. It's one of the great mysteries of the Chumash. And that is, we know the brothers gather together, they convene some kind of judicial decision to sell Yosef. And somehow, for all those 22 years that Yosef was missing, what did Yaakov Avinu think? He thought Yosef was dead. Taraf Yosef. Did anybody ever tell Yaakov what happened? Nobody said a word. Even though, Yaakov, maybe he should have thought, why am I not forgetting about this Yosef? Usually a mess you begin to forget about after a year. The pain fades, the acute memory fades, and Yaakov still is vividly reliving the pain as if it just happened, but it never dawned on Yaakov Avinu that Yosef was still alive, even though he caught a glimmer. Vayar Yaakov ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim. He had some kind of intuition, maybe. But the bottom line is, Yaakov never knew that Yosef was sold down to Mitzrayim. And we don't even know if after, when they told Yaakov that Yosef was still alive, if Yaakov ever found out that Yosef was sold. According to some, somehow Yosef got lost in the forest. He was bought, he was sold as a slave, and he ended up in the land of Egypt. And Yaakov Avinu maybe never knew until on his deathbed he saw Baruch HaKodesh Vayimararuhu Varoivu. Why didn't anybody tell Yaakov? Why didn't Yosef tell Yaakov? So regarding why Yosef didn't send a message to Yaakov, we spoke about 4 or 5 years ago, the approach of the Ramban, that basically Yosef felt his dreams were prophecy, and he had to bring the fulfillment of the prophecy to fruition, and the brothers had to come down and bow down to him, and Yaakov had to come down and bow down to him, and Yosef could not interfere with that process of the brothers and Yaakov Avinu coming down to bow down to Yosef, so Yosef never said anything. But why didn't God say anything? Why did the Rebbeinu Shalom allow Yaakov to suffer for so many years? So let's start with Rashi. We have a lot of information tonight. I think we're going to do this year in 2 parts. Probably part 2 we'll do, I don't know, tomorrow night if you want to come on Zoom, or we'll record it. Let's start with Rashi. Most things tonight I'm going to speak outside, but this I want to see inside. Says Rashi, Chayorora achalasu. Yaakov saw the cloak of Yosef, it was bloodied, it was torn, and Yaakov said he was ripped apart by a wild animal. Says Rashi, Nitznitza by Ruach HaKodesh. The divine spirit glimmered in Yaakov Avinu. He realized that Yosef would have to face a chaya, a wild animal. Who was that? Eshes Potifar. She was going to attack him. She would be aggressive to him. Says Rashi, V'lama lagila lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why didn't the Almighty tell Yosef, hey Yosef, why didn't the Almighty tell Yaakov, Yosef's still alive? Says Rashi, Lefi shehecharimoi because they made a kherem. V'kilulai, and they cursed as kol mi sheyagala, anyone who reveals. That alone, we already have 10 questions. They made a kherem, and they cursed anyone who reveals. Okay, what does that have to do with God? V'shitfai la'akadosh baruch hu. God, they joined him in. It seems the simple words of Rashi are saying they made a kherem and God couldn't violate the kherem. They put into kherem anyone who would violate this pact. They could put God in kherem? I'm not asking any questions here, I'm just telling you the words. So now, okay. So that alone is like a bombshell. There are many, many difficulties with that, and we're going to try to address them tonight. But first I just want to get the words and the story, and then we'll analyze it. Says Rashi, did Yitzchak know where Yosef was? Yeah. Aval Yitzchak hayadeh shu chai. Yitzchak knew he was alive. How? How did Yitzchak know if there was a kherem that nobody could tell anybody? But Yitzchak knew. Omar, Yitzchak said, Hey Chagala, how can I reveal? How comes God? So God doesn't want to reveal, so how could I reveal? Now, interestingly, Rashi doesn't say Yitzchak said, how could I reveal? There's a kherem. Also, Yitzchak didn't say, how could I reveal? God is not allowed to reveal. Rashi didn't say that. Rashi says, God doesn't want to reveal. So is Hashem not allowed to, or is Hashem not want to? But the beginning of Rashi seems to imply that they put into kherem and they cursed anyone who would reveal, and they joined HaKadosh Baruch Hu with them. A couple years ago, I saw many Mefarshim speak about this, and I was afraid to talk about it until today. What changed? I don't know. It's at post-COVID-19, you know? It's a new era.
Biden's president.
There you go. So let's get this story. This story is described in full detail in the Medrash Tanchuma, in number 3, and a little bit later in Pirkei Rabbi Elazar. Actually, Pirkei Rabbi Elazar came first. Let's see the Pirkei Rabbi Elazar. Amru, the Shvatim said, Nachrim beinen, let's make a kherem, that not one of us will say anything until everyone gives permission. No one's going to breathe a word until we all give rishus. So Yehuda said, wait a second, making a kherem? Hoshea, Shimon, Es, Levi, Amecha, Yehuda, Uvarech, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher. What's going on? Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zevulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher. Binyamin not around. Yosef, he's in the pit. Reuven's out to lunch today, so we only have 9 people. We need a center. Who are you going to get as a center? Baruch Hashem, I was a rabbi in different kehillos. I was in Queens. Well, my main job is to get a 10th guy for the minyan. So I could spend like the majority of my life doing that. That's why now we have a Shabbos minyan, because I'm waiting for somebody else to do the. Anyway, so people used to joke. I used to bring people from the bus. Guy got off the bus, and I would bring him in the shul. People say, "Is he Jewish? He's not Jewish." He came down. He was wearing a yarmulke. So I had people of all stripes, colors. People said, "Well, you megayer them on the way down." Whatever we had to do to get a minyan, we made a minyan. They don't have a minyan over here. You need a minyan for a kherem. So looking around, center, God, we'll get God. God will be the 10th person, the Medrash says. Ma'asu shitfu lamaka mimayim. They joined up God, v'hechrimai. And they put him in kherem. Reuven comes back. He looks for Yosef in the pit. Yosef's gone. He said, oh no, Yosef's dead. They told the brothers. They said, shh, we sold him. But don't tell anyone, because anyone who says a word, they're in kherem. Wait a second. Wow, brothers, you've done a really good job keeping the secret. You just said anyone who breathes a word is in kherem, and a minute later Reuven says, where's Yosef? And they say, shh, don't tell anyone. Anyone who says a word is in kherem. So what happened? They violated the kherem there? So Reuven said, oh, there's a kherem. Shh. And even HaKadosh Baruch Hu was silent. Because of the kherem, even though God tells everything to Yaakov, Shenemar Magid Devarav LiYaakov, this he didn't breathe a word. And therefore Yaakov didn't know anything. and the Shvatim were not neskaper until they died. Says the Pirkei Rabbi a couple lines later, when the brothers came down and they found Yosef, they released the kherem. Hitiru es kherem. After all, Pirkei Rabbi says they made up, nobody could tell Yaakov unless we all agree. So apparently when Yosef said, I'm Joseph, they said, okay, let's get together. They huddled. They said, okay, 1, 2, 3, mutter, 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 and then it's all good. Fine, says the Medrash. That's why Yaakov Avinu did not have Ruach HaKodesh for 22 years. Because it says when he found out Yosef was alive, his spirit was revived. What happened until then? He was dead. Says the Medrash, because of the kherem almost stopped God from speaking to Yaakov. God didn't even talk to Yaakov. He didn't say good morning, good afternoon. He didn't give him weather reports, nothing. No communication between the Rebbeinu Shalom and Yaakov Avinu. And then when Yosef revealed himself, the Rebbeinu Shalom came back to Yaakov Avinu. So this is the kherem.
So when the kherem was over, did anybody ever tell Yaakov?
Let's see. This is the information we have so far. Let's continue with the next Rashi. Look at number 4. It says, Vayev goysoi aviv, his father cried for him. So Rashi says it doesn't mean Yaakov cried for Yosef, it means Yitzchak cried for Yaakov. Says Rashi, Yitzchak boicha hayam b'nei Yisrael shel Yaakov. But why didn't Yitzchak mourn? Shahaya yodea shu chai. Yitzchak knew he was alive. Asked the Sivsei Chachamim, who told him? How did he know? Says the Sivsei Chachamim, God told him. But you're not allowed to tell anybody because you tell anyone you're in kherem? No, the kherem was you can't tell Yaakov. But God could tell Yitzchak. I would say, you have to say the kherem is that nobody could tell Yaakov. Because the kherem is nobody could tell anyone, how could they tell Reuven? I think it's Mavuar in the Medrash that the kherem was only you can't tell Yaakov. Because clearly when Reuven said, I don't know where he is, they said, okay, we'll tell you. What about the kherem? The kherem is you can't tell Yaakov.
He was part of the minion for the kherem, he had to be in on it.
Who was?
Reuven. He was part of the minion.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't there. He wasn't part of the minion.
But they were Hashem.
They were Mitzaref Hashem. But they weren't Mitzaref Reuven. Right? So Reuven, he wasn't in. You mean maybe Reuven's not bound?
Right.
Only God is bound.
Part of the...
But he's not bound. That means he's allowed to tell. But are they allowed to tell him?
I would have thought yes, because there were the brothers and they were all there.
Well, Yaakov wasn't there either, so they couldn't tell.
In the area together. They did it together. They don't do it.
I would think the kherem means you can't tell. If you're in the kherem, you can't tell. Okay. Now, take a look at number 18 for a moment. Because here's the question. Rabbeinu Bechaye elaborates on this kherem. He says, God has been joined for many different community activities in Sefer Bereshis. The kherem is not the only thing God could be the 10th man for. We know when Avram Avinu was looking for a 10th tzaddik in the city of Sodom, he said, if I find 9, God, you'll be number 10. So there is a precedent that we could combine God to be a center. Furthermore, Rabbeinu Bechaye says, when Moshe Rabbeinu needed a bezdin of 10 by Kabbalas HaTorah, he joined Kadosh Baruch Hu in on the convocation. And then Rabbeinu Bechaye says, wait a second. The fact that God could be a 10th to save Sodom, maybe God could only be a 10th for Hatzalah, for salvation. But to be a 10th to sell Yosef, I mean, it's apples and oranges. You can't extrapolate and say, just like God is the 10th to save the city of Sodom, he could also be the 10th to sell Yosef. Selling Yosef is murder. So Rabbeinu Bechaye says, well, no, that was also salvation. Because what's the reason why the brothers didn't want Yaakov Avinu to know what they did? Because they were afraid that if Yaakov would find out what they did, he would curse them. And if Yaakov curses you, then you're dead. In the times of the Gemara, if an Amoira gave you a bad look, you would drop dead. So if Yaakov Avinu would have cursed them, they would have died. So God coming in on the deal, on the pact, not to breathe a word of what happened to Yosef was also salvation. It was to save the brothers and the future of the Jewish people. So you could compare. Now, says Rabbeinu Bechaye, so how did Yitzchak know? Because God told him. But what about the kherem? No, the kherem is only you can't tell Yaakov, but you're allowed to tell someone else. You know who else God told? God told Binyamin. How do I know? Because Binyamin's stone on the ephod was yashpeh. Yashpeh means yesh peh, he has a mouth. What does it mean he has a mouth? He knows information and he's not saying it. What information did Binyamin know? He knew that the brother sold Yosef and he didn't say. So God told Yitzchak and God told Binyamin. So Rabbi Mechai is of the opinion, you could tell someone else, you just can't tell Yaakov Avinu. In fact, God told Yitzchak and God told Binyamin. There's another approach that is offered in the Sefer Divrei Avram, and I'm just giving you some background before we dig into this, because you haven't heard anything yet. And that is, God didn't tell maybe Yitzchak anything. You know how Yitzchak knew? He knew Baruch HaKodesh. You know, there's some people, they just know. You know, they know. They're connected. So Yitzchak knew Baruch. Why didn't Yaakov know Baruch HaKodesh? Because Yaakov was very saddened and mourning because he didn't know where his son was. So he couldn't have Baruch HaKodesh because he was in a state of sadness. But Yitzchak wasn't in the same state of sadness, so he knew Baruch HaKodesh. And then how did Binyamin know? Maybe Binyamin also had Baruch HaKodesh, and then God didn't breathe a word to anybody. Rivka is not alive.
Why wouldn't he be in the same state of sadness?
He's the grandfather. There's a threshold. You have to be this big of a tzaddik and this sad, and he was still connected. His Wi-Fi was good, and Yaakov lost it. Here's the problem. Okay, we're not even starting yet. After this, we're going to start. If you look in Parshas V'Zois HaBracha, the pasuk says, Baruch mibanim Asher. Asher is the most blessed of all children. Yehi ritzoy echav. His brother should love him. V'toivel b'Hashem en raglei, and he could dip his toes in oil. I'm sure you always wanted to do that. Dip your toes in oil. Well, Asher could do that. Says the Baal HaTurim, why is Asher given this bracha that he should be the most blessed of all the brothers? Says the Baal HaTurim, because there's this lady. I'll tell you where the Baal HaTurim is. You're looking around. The Baal HaTurim is number 16. There is a lady. She lived like forever. Serach bas Asher. And you know what Serach bas Asher knew? She knew the brother sold Yosef. And the Shvatim said, how did she know? It must be if a kid knows something. Every Rebbe in Yeshiva knows that whatever a kid knows, the parents told them. Where else did the kid get it from? Nowadays there are other ways the kids got it. But back in the day, Shuta diyanuka oida avu oida ima. If a kid says something, he heard it from his dad or he heard it from his mom. So how did Serach know the brother sold Yosef? It must be Asher told her. But what about the kherem? Oh, Asher violated the kherem. They put Asher in kherem. So Moshe Rabbeinu had to yank Asher out of kherem. So he said, Baruch mibanim Asher, he should be blessed as opposed to cursed by the kherem. And that which nobody likes him, Yehi Rutzoyechav, like him again. And if you're in Cherem, you're not to have children, it's also to engage in Tasha Shamita, Yehi Rutzoyechav, he's mutter b'tashmish. And you can't smear oil on yourself, let him dip his toes in the oil again. Why? Because Asher's in Cherem, she violated the Cherem. What do you mean he violated the Cherem? I thought the Sufsei Chachamim said, you just can't tell Yaakov, but you're allowed to tell someone else. So how did Asher violate the Cherem? Right? The Sifsei Chachamim said Yaakov is allowed to tell Yitzchak. Rabbi Mechai says Yaakov told Binyamin. So what's wrong that Asher told Serach? So some want to suggest, the Sefer Mo'ez Chaye suggests, whenever there's information and we can't let Yaakov know, that means you can't tell him and you can't tell someone who will ultimately tell him. Binyamin, he'll be discreet. Yitzchak will be discreet. But now you can tell a lady? Sorry. But that's what the Gemara says by the Rashbi. The Rashbi basically couldn't hide out in his house because he knew they would go to his wife and his wife would spill the beans. He spilled the beans about her own husband? No, the Gemara says, women are not as discreet about these things. So, okay, is this a good answer? I don't know. It sounds a little bit forced that you're allowed to tell Yitzchak, you're allowed to tell Binyamin, but you can't tell Serach because Okay, I think we're going to try to offer another approach over here to try to defend the honor of Serach Bas Ashar. Here we go. Here's the main question of the evening. I'm sure you're all thinking of this question and you all have it on your mind. Namely, what in the world is this kherem? You could put God in kherem. You could say, God, I don't want to hear a word out of you. If you say another word, you're in kherem. We're going to get together here, 9 of us and you, and we're putting you in kherem. I mean, you could chain God down, chas v'shalom, chalila v'chas. Is God bound by the kherem of a human being? What in the world does this mean? What is this kherem? And this question is articulated in different forms. For example, in the Sefer Teshua Gedola, about the Satmar Rebbe from Rav Moshe Teitelbaum, he says, how do you put God in a kherem to do kidnapping of Ashar, of Yosef? It's one thing you want to kidnap, you want to abduct your brother, leave God out of it. How do you make a kherem and include God in it? Furthermore, there's a Sefer Shiur Chumash who says, Rashi's bothered. Why didn't God tell Yaakov? Which implies the right thing to do would have been to tell Yaakov. So what's the answer? God didn't tell, even though that's the right thing, because he's in kherem. So God didn't do the right thing because of some kherem that human beings placed on him. And the Maral even says, because they put God in kherem, God didn't reveal something that somebody needed to know about. Some of Rabbi say there are 5 approaches to deal with this issue. Tonight we're going to learn 3. Okay, so you have to stay at least for 3 of them. And maybe tomorrow night we'll do 2. The first one is the Mizrahi. Rabbi Yahu Mizrahi lived from 1450 to 1525. This was the first preeminent work written on Rashi. Rabbi Yahu Mizrahi was a Rav in Constantinople, Kushta, now known as Istanbul. He wrote a Perush on Rashi, Al Pi Pshat. No philosophy, no mysticism. He was not a proponent of mysticism. So his Perush is strict logic and reason. The Marsha quotes Rabbi Yahu Mizrahi extensively. Rabbi Yahu Mizrahi was very involved in absorption when, after the Spanish Inquisition, many Jews in Spain, where do they go? They go to Turkey. In fact, there is a shul in Turkey today called Geresh, because of the Gerushe Sfarad. And the Mizrahi was very hurt by the Spanish Inquisition, because he had a son. And some of the Gerushim from Spain went along with a rumor that his son articulated his belief in Islam. And if somebody says they believe in Islam, then the law is they need to convert to Islam. And these Olim supported this lie, and basically his son had to run out of the country, and he had to go to some island in the Aegean area, to Nexus, and there also some Jews continued to support that lie. And the Mizrahi was very hurt because he gave up a year of learning, writing, teaching to help these Gerushe Sfara, and he felt that they burnt him. Anyway, the Mizrahi deals with this question. What kind of kherem is it? Could you put God in kherem? Is it binding? And the Mizrahi deals with this in a very rational sense. You can't put God in kherem. God is not bound by the kherem of Basar V'Dam. You know what it means that they put God in kherem? It means as follows. The brothers said to themselves, we're in deep trouble. If we sell Yosef, God's going to tell Yaakov what we did. He's going to, disown us. How could we make sure that God will join us in keeping this a secret? The brothers said to themselves, they had a tradition that one of them would be sold. And through him being sold, the other brothers would come to rescue him, and ultimately all the Jewish people would go down to Egypt. I mean, they're the grandson of Avraham Avinu. What did God say to Abraham? Abraham, you're going to go down to Egypt, and your descendants are going to be exiles in a land that doesn't belong to them. So the brothers knew they would one day end up in Egypt. So they figured, if we sell Yosef down to Egypt, that's going to be the vehicle with which God uses to get us all down there. If we sell him, God's not going to breathe a word. He's not going to say anything. He's not going to foil his own plan. God is in on this. So it's not that they put God in kherem, it's that they realize that if they sell Yosef down to Mitzrayim, this is going to be the tool with which God uses to get them all down to Egypt. There's no way in a million years God would foil the plot, because it's His plan. It's not even their plan. Now, whether they should be doing this or not, that they took on their own shoulders. But they realized God would never spill the beans because it would foil His plan. Because if God tells Yaakov, hey, Yaakov, Yosef's in Mitzrayim. So Yaakov is a wealthy guy. Yaakov Avinu is wealthier than Rockefeller. He's wealthier than Rothschild. You know the story? There's a Rabbi in Yeshiva. He said, if I had the money of Rothschild, I'd be wealthier than Rothschild, because I would tutor on the side. Right? So Yaakov Avinu was a very wealthy guy, and he said, if Yaakov would know Yosef Mitzrayim, he'd bail him out. He'd pay his bail. So the Rebbe is not going to say a word. So the brothers realize if we sell Yosef now, God's not going to say anything. Not that he's in kherem, but they made a kherem they're not going to say, and they knew God would go along with it. So is there any greater partnership than to make a pact among themselves and then to say, you know what, God is in on the same thing because He's not going to breathe a word. That's the kherem that God was in. They didn't put him in cherem. It's something they realized on their own that God would never reveal anything. That's why, says the Mizrahi, Yitzchak knew that Yosef was alive, but he said, how should I reveal? God doesn't want to reveal. Rashi doesn't say that God won't reveal, or God's not allowed to reveal. He said God doesn't want to, which indicates God was allowed to, He just wouldn't. That's the meaning of this cherem. It's the Mizrahi says, "Mikivan sheyadu haskamasa yisala b'cherem." When they realized that God would go along with their cherem, ein lecha shitav gadol mizeh. There's no greater attachment and partnership than their knowledge that God would go along with this. You know what the proof is? Says the Mizrahi. Because once Yosef said, "Hey, bros, you know who I am?" So who are you? You're Tafnas Paneach. You're Avrei. No, I'm Joseph. Yosef, huh? He said, come close. Yeah, I never let you get near me. You were always looking at me from afar, and I was wearing, my hat over my eyes and my sunglasses, and, come close. He took off his glasses. He said, hey, it's Yosef. I look exactly like you. I talk exactly like you. So the brothers were flabbergasted. He said, oh, the whole reason why nobody was allowed to say anything was so that you should go down to Egypt and we should follow you. Now that we're here, so now we could tell Yaakov Avinu. Says the Mizrahi, how is it that once Yosef revealed himself, they went and they told Yaakov Avinu, whoever released the cherem? Did you ever see in the Torah that the brothers gather together and they huddled and they say, 1, 2, 3, muterlach, muterlach, muterlach. So how could they just go tell Yaakov? The answer is because there was never a cherem. It was just sort of an understood agreement that we need to cooperate with Hashem's master plan of getting us down to Egypt. Now that we're here, so now we could tell Yaakov Avinu. That's, so to speak, the rational approach to this supposed cherem. There was no supposed cherem. Yeah, so what does that mean? What exactly is that cherem? It's, they themselves made up they're not going to tell. And they knew God wouldn't tell. So that's like a joint partnership. And once Yosef was there, and the whole purpose of it was to allow God's plan to unfold, and once it unfolded, then the cherem sort of dissipates and becomes obsolete on its own. That's the Mizrahi.
It's kind of weird because, they knew that he's alive and they went there specifically to look for him.
They didn't know for sure he was alive. They went to try to find him. But once they did, and once he revealed himself, so it comes out the cherem is obsolete. That is the approach of the Mizrahi. According to the Mizrahi, there was no real cherem over here. It was sort of a deal among themselves that they knew God would go along with. Now I want to tell you the Maharal's pshat, but hang in there because the ultimate pshat over here is the Levush, which is mind-boggling. Okay? You're like this. Comes the Maharal. The Maharal said, is God bound by a cherem? Says the Maharal, similar to the Mizrahi. No. They made a cherem no one's allowed to tell. they knew that God wouldn't say anything, or he would agree not to say, because if anyone breathes the word to Yaakov Avinu is going to curse them, and then they would start dropping like flies, and nobody wants the Shvatim to die. So the Maharal says the brothers knew that for like a split second God would say, this is a good idea. Now, if God would not be bound by the kherem, then Yaakov Avinu would have gone to Shul. He would have said, Rebbeinu Shalom, where's my son? Tell me where my son is. And then God would have revealed to Yaakov Avinu where his son is. But once God agreed to the kherem for a different reason, namely God didn't want anyone to tell Yaakov, so Yaakov doesn't curse his sons, so Hashem went along with the kherem. Now God is bound by the kherem that he consented to, and once God consents to the kherem, then God is bound by it, and then he's permanently bound by it. Because he agreed to it initially, because God didn't want anyone to tell Yaakov, so Yaakov doesn't curse his sons. So the Maharal says, who says that God is bound by the kherem? Maybe God just doesn't want Yaakov to know about it, so that Yaakov doesn't curse his sons. Who said there's any kherem over here? No. You see that really God wanted to tell, and he's only being bound by the kherem from the fact that like every other word that comes out of Yaakov's mouth and the Shvatim's mouth is like a glimmer of Ruach HaKodesh, which means that some degree of communication God is keeping, which means he must be bound by the kherem. And then the Maharal, just bear with this for a little bit. Then the Maharal says, you know who else deals with this question? Shalas Tshuvas Mahari Kolon. And he says, you know why God went along with the plan not to tell anything to Yaakov Avinu? God wanted to punish Yaakov Avinu. Why did he want to punish Yaakov Avinu? Because Yaakov Avinu was away from his parents for 22 years, and he didn't let them know where he was, and he didn't send a postcard, and he didn't send them a message, he didn't email home. So because he didn't communicate with his parents, therefore God did not want Yaakov Avinu to know about Yosef, so he went along with the kherem. Then the Maharal says, none of this business. I don't accept any of this. He says, if you look carefully, and this is the Maharal's pshat, finally. You ready? It is not mashma in the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer that God had a particular reason not to tell Yaakov. It's they needed God to be there. You know why? Because if you have 9 guys, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, you have 9 guys, and they say, okay, we're not going to say anything. Yeah, but you don't have a minion. God, come here. Come, you'll be the 10th. So they brought God in not to bind God. God's not bound. They brought God in that they should be bound. You know what it's like? It's like when you have 9 guys at a minyan. It's like 11:30 at night, and they can't get a 10th. So you call a guy up. Come to the shul. We need a center. He said, I davened Marav 3 times already tonight. What do you? Yeah, come anyway. We're not saying you could daven. You don't need to daven. You don't daven. You're just going to be the 10th. So you don't have to daven, but we need you for us to daven. So it's the same thing with the kherem. God's not in kherem. God could say whatever he wants. God's not bound by the kherem. But they need God so that they're bound by the kherem. And the Maharal says, this is very meduyuk in the Lashon of Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. Take a look at number 2. Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says, on the 3rd line, Ruvain einoi kan. Ruvain's not around, but ein acher miskayim al basara. The kherem could only be upheld with 10. Ma'asu shitfu lamokoim. They joined who? Hashem. Who does it say Hashem? No, it says lamokoim. What's the makoim? Hashem. That's a name for God. Like Baruch HaMakoim, Baruch Hu. A few lines later it says, Gam HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shasa. God was also silent. So God got a promotion. In the beginning, they joined Hamakoim, and it says God didn't want to say. Why didn't it say Hamakoim didn't want to say? Why in the beginning of the Medrash does it say they joined the Makoim with them, and then it says God didn't want to say? It says Maharal like this. They were stuck. A kherem is not a binding if you don't have a minyan. So you can't just say, hey, God, come, be part of the minyan. There's a certain connection that we all have with God, that He's close to us, in that, why is God called Hamakoim? Because he encompasses everything. He encompasses me, he encompasses you, he encompasses the spot that you are. So that dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they could summon to be part of the minyan because that's something they're associated with. So they called the Makaim, that connection to God, that God is the place of the world and is near them. Hey, come here, you'll be number 10. Now they have a 10th, so they're bound by the kherem. Of course, God's not bound by the kherem. You can't bind God to anything. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that they made a kherem, so in deference to the kherem that they made on themselves, God said, I don't want to talk it either. You know, like derech eretz. They made a kherem, they're bound, I'm not going to say anything. So that's mavur in the Pirkei Rabbi Elazar. Is God bound by the kherem? No. But God didn't want to say. By the way, I think this would answer our question from Yitzchak. Who told Yitzchak? God. How could he? It's not bound. Who told Binyamin? God. Who told Sarach? God. The brothers didn't know that God told Sarach. They just thought Asher told Sarach. So they put Asher in kherem. But really God told her, and it's not a problem. It's not that they were angry because Asher told a lady and a lady is more apt to say. Whether that is or not true, that's beyond the permissibility of this discussion over here. But God is not bound according to the Maral. It's just Hashem deferred to the kherem that they made.
But they added him.
They added him for their purposes. Right. So vis-a-vis them, they're bound because God is there. But God being there doesn't bind God. That's how the Maral understands it. That is the approach of the Gur Aryeh, basically in a nutshell. Comes the Levush, and we'll end with this approach. This is one of the most startling things I ever heard or ever came across. I don't say that lightly. The Levush says that the Maral has a question. How do we know that God didn't say it because he's in kherem? Maybe he just didn't say it because he didn't want Yaakov to curse his sons.
Hello?
Hello. You can hear me?
I can't went back to the Zoom meeting.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm on. Okay. So the Maral says that question, that maybe God didn't say because he didn't want Yaakov to curse his sons, is the most ridiculous question I ever heard. God would curse his sons and kill them? Why? Yaakov would curse his sons? Why? Because they sold Yosef? So because of what they did to one brother, Yaakov's going to knock off all his kids? Why doesn't God should tell Yaakov, Yosef was sold, do me a favor, pal, don't say anything bad to your kids. Don't hurt them. If God was worried that if you tell Yaakov, Yaakov would curse his kids, so God should tell Yaakov, do me like when Hashem came to Lavan. He said, Lavan, I'm telling you something, and don't say not a good thing and not a bad thing to Yaakov Avinu. So God should have came to Yaakov and say, Yaakov, don't curse your kids. And do you really think, you suspect Yaakov would have been so angry that he would have cursed his kids? Atu b'shuftani askinan, says Levush. Are we talking about chas v'shalom, a shuftani, a fool, a rasha? The Levush says that Yaakov would do such a thing. I'm just telling you the words he uses. That would have been insanity. It would be shigayon for Yaakov to do such a thing. And therefore, the Levush says, the Gur Aryeh asks, is God bound by a kherem? Which implies that the Gur Aryeh was learning, the brothers imposed a kherem on God, to which the Gur Aryeh says, well, they sort of did, because they knew that he would go along with it, because he didn't want Yaakov to curse them, so they imposed the kherem on God. And it says Levush, you think the brothers, a human being, can impose anything on God? Says Levush, let me tell you what happened. You ready? You never heard this account of Mechiras Yosef. Guaranteed. Maybe you did. I never heard anything like this. Says the Levush, I want you to see it inside. We're on page 3, second column. The Levush, of course, the three main commentaries of on Rashi are Mizrahi, Gur Aryeh, Levush. Levush ha'ira. Remordechai Yafa. I want you to see this inside. This is the second column. We're on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 14, 15, 6, the 16th, the 17th line. Ella ani oimer. You know what I say? Shevadai echa mehem yarad lemerkava. One of the brothers, they said a divine name, and they went to the Merkava. They went to the Kisei HaKavod. And he says, maybe it was Levi. It was, in all probability, it was Levi. He was the one who did it. Now, don't try that at home. But he said a shame. He went to the Merkava, and he asked God, God, if we sell Yosef, you're in on it, or you're in or out? In or out? Will you agree to be part of the kherem, that we're not going to say anything? No, it's not that they worried that Yaakov would curse them. They were worried that Yaakov would be angry with them, and it's not right to do that to their father. Kibbut avayim, kavod, yira. So they asked God, if we sell him, you're in or out?
You approve it.
Are you going to? Okay, Klo. Are you in on the kherem? Will you breathe a word? And God said, listen to what God said. God said, Buha. Bracha v'atzlacha. God said, should be matzliach.
Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu needed the prophecy to actually be...
God said, you will be matzliach. Why? Because the Satan's going to help you out. But God didn't say why. He said, bracha v'atzlacha. Go for it. And God said, I'll be in the kherem. I won't say a word. Now, why did God? God didn't say why. If you want to know why, it's because Yaakov needed to be punished for going away from his father. But Levi asked God, God, if we sell him, in or out? God said, I'm in. I'm not going to say a word. Says the Levush, this is the most spectacular thing I ever heard. He said, I'll bring you a clear proof that this is what happened. On Yom Kippur, we read the Piyut about the 10 martyrs. And there's a man by the name of Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol. And we know the 10 martyrs were an atonement for the sale of Yosef. And according to some, they were the Gilgulim of the 10 sons of Yosef. Yeah? And it says, Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol said a name. He went to the Merkava and he asked God, God, is this decreed on us? And God said, yeah, it's decreed on you. This is what's going to happen. The Satan will be matzliach. And he'll knock you guys off. And we know everything God does is quid pro quo, midah keneged midah. So if the punishment came that one of them asked God, God, did you decree that we should all be murdered? Will they be successful in killing us? And they said a name, and they asked God, and it was a descendant of Levi, Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol. He was the one. And the punishment came that they said a name, and they asked Hashem, and Hashem said, yes, it must be the sale happened in an exact parallel way, where Levi or all of the Shvatim went up to Shemayim, asked God, God, if we sell Yosef, you're in or you're out? And God said, I'm in, count me in. So asked the Levush, so then they didn't do anything wrong. They asked the Shaila. Like all good Jews that ask a Shaila to the Rav, only when they know what he's going to answer. Says the Levush, they didn't ask God, should they sell Yosef? Because then God was, you sell him, you're kidnapping him. You're going to pay the price for all time. They said, if we sell him, are you going to breathe the word? God said, I lead people on the way they want to go, even if they're doing the wrong thing. So Levush says, they didn't ask God if they should. They were like Bilam. Bilam said, God, should I go? No. Should I go? No. Should I go? No. The Chumash says, God saw he wanted to go, so he said go. They didn't ask God, should we sell him? They weren't allowed to sell him. And they knew not better than to ask God whether. They just asked, if we sell him, are you in or out? So God says, I always go along with a person's ambition and desired goal. So you guys want to sell him? Then I'm just telling you one thing. You're asking me my opinion. I will not breathe a word. They didn't ask Rishus, that they should sell him. So the question was, can a human being bind God? Yeah. if they ask God, would you like to be bound? And God says, yes, I would like to be bound. So the Almighty is agreeing to be bound by man, so they did it. The Gur Aryeh then asks, well, if the reason why God went along with it is because he wanted Yaakov to be punished, so why didn't God just say to Yaakov Avinu, look, Yosef's still alive, but I'm not telling you where he is? So that's silly, says the Gur Aryeh, says the Levush. As if the Gur Aryeh knows exactly to what extent God wants to visit punishment on Yaakov Avinu. No, the brothers asked, if we sell him, are you going to say? And God said, I'm not going to say. Why? God has his cheshbonos. So basically, we have three approaches tonight of what exactly this kherem is. The approach of Mizrahi is there is no kherem. The brothers made up among themselves that they wouldn't say. They knew God would remain silent because Rivan Shem wanted to bring to fruition the bris bein habesarim, that the Jews would end up in Mitzrayim. So them knowing God didn't want to say is like God is partnering them with them in their pact of silence. But it wasn't a real kherem. You can't bind God. The Gur Aryeh starts off by saying, well, they knew God didn't want to say because God didn't want Yaakov to curse the sons. Ultimately, what the Gur Aryeh says is that they brought the Makoim in to the deal to bind them, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not bound. They're bound by God being there. God is not bound by being there, but in deference to what they did, he didn't say anything. And the Levush says they bound God. How do you bind God? If you ask him and he says, yeah, I'm in, so then he's in. When did they ask him? It must be Levi went upstairs and asked God, are you in? And he said, yes. And what's the proof? The proof is the Asar Harugei Malchus. They also asked God if they would be successful. So if that was the punishment where they asked the Merkava, it must be the sin was also committed in such a fashion. Now, we'll end off with this. There are another two approaches to this. Maybe we'll do a Zoom share tomorrow night. If you want to join, please. Hopefully by then I'll know what the other two approaches are. There's a sefer on Shas called the Be'er Sheva of Rabbi Sachar Ber Eilenberg. You ever hear the Be'er Sheva? Be'er Sheva, sometimes Rabbi Kiva Eger quotes it. And he is a student of the Levush. And he addresses all of these approaches, the Mizrahi, the Gur Aryeh, and the Levush. I'll tell you what he says about it in a nutshell. He says about his Rebbe Levush, he said, look, if there's some kind of tradition going back to Har Sinai, that Levi went upstairs and asked God, and God said, yeah, I'm in on it, so, okay, look, im Kabbalah hi nekabel. If there's a tradition, then we'll accept it. Otherwise, this is not something you could just conjecture based on a question that Levi must have gone upstairs and asked God, and God said, yeah, well, I'll go along with it. Regarding the Mizrahi's approach, that there's no real kherem over here, and the Mizrahi says the proof is that because when Yosef revealed himself, they never released the kherem. So if I could just ask my own question, if you look in Perkei Rebbe Lezer, it says explicitly, when Yosef said, Ani Yosef, hitiru es kherem. They said, okay. They got together and they said, mutar lach, mutar lach, mutar lach. So the Medrash says explicitly they released the kherem. But the Mizrahi says, we don't find anywhere that they released the kherem, so how could they spill the beans? It must be there was no kherem, it was just to allow God's plan to come to fruition. So to that, the Tzedel Aderech asks, the kherem was not that nobody could say Yosef's still alive. The kherem is nobody could say Yosef was sold. So they told Yaakov, Yosef is still alive. Yaakov said, how? They said, I don't know. Go, yeah. That must have been some story, they said. So we don't know for sure that they violated the kherem. And furthermore, the Tzedel Aderech says maybe they did release the kherem. And also, if the reason why they thought God went along with them is because God wanted Yaakov Avinu to suffer for 22 years, think about it. So why would the brothers try to kill Yosef? The only way Yaakov is going to suffer for 22 years is if Yosef is still alive, and Yaakov cannot be consoled for 22 years because he's actually alive. But if they would kill him, then he wouldn't be suffering for 22 years. And the Tzedel Derech sides with the Gur Aryeh that they didn't want God to, they knew God would go along with them because Hashem would not want Yaakov Avinu to curse his sons. And that's what Rabbeinu Bechaye himself says. Be'ezus Hashem, next time we're going to discuss the approach of the Shalshelas HaKabbalah and the Shlach HaKadosh.
At the end, when after Yosef is revealed and we know that, does Yaakov not ask what happened? How'd you get down here?
It seems like they never told him. The Ramban, most Mefarshim learned, they never said that he was sold. Yaakov didn't know about it until his deathbed. He just thought Yosef was in a pit, someone must have rescued him, and he ended up in Egypt, and the brother said, beats us how in the world he got there.
Does Rabbi didn't come back?
He did, but it seems like the kherem was still in place, that nobody said a word. That's the simple approach. Nobody ever told Yaakov until on his deathbed.
No one in Egypt would have known of that because they bought him actually, so they must have known where he came from. If you think about it.
Well, the brothers sold him to Arab, to Yishmaelim, to Midyanim, where they got it, I'm saying when you buy something, it says made in China, you know which guy sold it to which guy, to which company. Most people.
But my phone cover doesn't talk. Everybody else does. So
the brothers sold to one buyer, and he got sold multiple times on the slave market,
Yosef never told the father,
Yosef never said a word. In fact, Rashi says in Parshas Vayechi, Yosef never spoke to Yaakov privately, so the brothers should not suspect that he told him anything.
Wow.
Here it is, executive summary. 3 approaches. What's the kherem? Says the Mizrahi, there was no kherem. They just knew that God wouldn't say not to spoil his plan. That's the Mizrahi. Gur Aryeh says, no. They brought God in to bind themselves, but God was not bound. But God went along with it. And then the approach to Levush is they said, God, you're in? And God said, I'm in. Afreilach and Chanukah, have a wonderful evening. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.